hello, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. I've gathered perhaps two of the best Warhammer players I know, and one is Graham, great Eldar player, Imperial Guard player, future Black Templar convert, um, and DJ from Tim's Nation, and of course me, Zachary. And I've gathered them here because I got some questions, and I'm hoping to get some answers, and hopefully we'll be able to spread some competitive wisdom and improve everyone's game with these answers that I know have been bringing a question in the back of my mind. If you guys want to just say hi and a little bit about yourself, that'd be cool. We've already done the podcast once, but Graham's new and DJ likes to introduce himself.
I just like to talk. That's basically what it comes down to. What's up, guy? DJ Tim's here with Tim's Nation. Zach, thanks for putting this together for me. Some of the technologies and stuff I'm still learning, and Zach's been a great help to me and kind of a mentor through building up my channel and being able to learn some of this newfangled tech for one of these older peoples.
You guys are old.
And as the resident old man, this is Graham, the putative Templars player. Zach and DJ will give me no end hard time because I have railed for years and years and years about how I will never ever play Space Marines, and here I am. I am greatly enjoying it, so I want to get into it and share some of what I've been thinking about with everybody else, and so you all can tell me how wrong I am.
See, and I'm not even a Space Marine player. All those years of you giving me poop about being a Space Marine player.
Hey,
No,
hey,
I'm deaf.
hey,
I'm deaf to saying
hey, are they toughness 4?
I'm a Death's
Are
Sanctus.
they in power armor?
Yes. Yes.
Are they toughness 4 and in power armor?
I have to spend 2 command points for my transhuman.
Mm-mm.
I have Sanctus Astaris keyword.
No, no, no. No, no, no.
See,
Zach, you said you had some questions today.
I mean,
Our Grey Knights Space Marines.
I mean,
Internet,
undoubtedly,
have
yes, yes. I mean,
Yeah,
but
let us know in the comment section. Are Grey Knights Space Marines? I say they're not. They're Sanctus Astaris.
I mean,
all right, and all of you who are wrong like DJ, go ahead and type down in the bottom why you're wrong.
all right. My question, all right. So Ark of Omens just dropped. It's hot. It's fresh. Everyone's debating about it. These new secondaries that generate CP, are they just all? Are they substance or are they just kind of there? I mean, looking at it initially, just hearing that armatures can
Graham,
get it.
You remember when we were playing into when they first created the 1 CP per turn, and when Imperial Guard had that command point farm. With
You
having
mean the Loyal 32?
Yes, and
Yeah.
you took the Castellan, and you had unending command points.
Yeah. So you took 32 guardsmen for just basically 8 CP or something ridiculous.
And
And
then
they were all 150 points, and it was glorious.
and then the relics and the extra little stuff that you took gave
Right.
you 5 ups on everything to generate CP.
Mhm.
So now we're introducing another layer of gaining command points, but it's limited to troops, armigers, and the chaos armigers, the warhounds. So
I think
is
it's
this starting to get,
wildly different. It's wildly, wildly, wildly different.
yeah, why is that?
So the
I
thing
mean, we're
with the
getting
Loyal
2 CP a turn, one for each
so the
turn.
thing with the Loyal 32 was that any Imperial army could insert it for a very low cost, and that was kind of independent of how difficult it might be to get secure command points otherwise. So, for example, you had a Knight army who loves their command points, getting full access to command points by just existing. Whereas here,
Yep.
you're getting more command points, but you actually have to do something with it. You can't just solve it in the army building phase.
Well, as well, in the fact that there's going to be a lot of armies that, now that they don't have to take troops, are going to tech out of troops. So one of the requirements to scoring these points is by taking your basic troops. So that, I think, is also going to play into a factor with it. I do agree. I don't think we're quite there yet, but it concerns me on how it's creeping into more command points over the course of the game. First, it was 1 command point at the beginning of each player's turn. Now we have army-wide access to a command point for completing a secondary objective for playing the game.
You know,
My question is why is more command points a bad thing?
it's see, in my opinion, it's not, because as a Space Marine player that doesn't play Gilliman, I have no additional way to generate command points. A lot of armies just don't have that ability to get that second command point in the turn. Like a lot of the main competitive armies, like Salamanders, we have absolutely no way. Um, I don't know. I know Harlequins are gonna like it because their troops are actually really good. I just can't see it being viable even for Space Marines because our troops, I mean, they're bolters now. Like they don't do anything significant anymore.
No. I mean, because you've got behind enemy lines, right? And so you can have a, an infiltrator squad sitting there and just bam, command point, bam, command point, victory point, command point, victory point, command point.
Mm-hmm. Granted, in a kind of precarious position.
Right, and then not all Space Marines are the same, right? So, for example, am I going to get mad points for killing things with Crusader squads? Sure. Will that give me command points? Sure. Will that let me kill more things with Crusader squads? Sure. Which will give me more command points, which will, So I think it just entirely comes down to your troop choices when you're trying to figure that out.
Fair enough.
I think it comes down to the pacing of the game. If some armies are able to dump a bunch of command points, and now that we're getting into a point, like looking at two of the armies I was playing before, Admech and Grey Knights, just to be able to unlock a bunch of different abilities, I'd bounce around multiple detachments, etc., 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 and then I was kind of micromanaging that beginning command points. Now, looking into a Grey Knights list, I'm easily able to play into a list that starts with 4 command points. In my army, the more command points I have and can dump into a single turn, the more vicious it is. What other armies can dump command points into a single turn, and if you allow them to do it twice, can really capitalize on that?
I mean, literally all of them. That's the entire point of command points.
Right. So I think there are still some armies that don't, even if they do, like Necrons, for example, with the Silent King, 3 extra command points. It never really overwhelmed. That didn't break anybody. Space Marines with Gilliman and his command point there's a bunch of guys that refund command points, and no one was calling for their heads.
Yeah, because
I do think
they were running with factions that didn't need CP as much as anyone else. Like, if Salamanders had 3 additional CP, we could throw on mortal wounds when we do Overwatch as Flamers. We could do a bunch of other stuff and be relatively unrestricted.
If Custodes have an extra CP,
I mean, their troops are.
Now, there's a lot of talk with them on the internet about how much strength they've gained. And I think that comes through some of the command point generations that we're seeing at this time. Now, is that Custodes just being brought back to a playable level since they got hit with the hardest nerf pad I've seen in years? Or is that too far?
Gee, that's a tough question. What do you think?
I don't think we've gone too far yet, but I think it's something that's getting kind of being cautious. That we're getting back to the point of having entire armies that can obliterate armies by going first and pouring command points, a la Admech.
Well, no, because okay, so one of the critical differences here is that you don't have it all up front. It's going to trickle in turn by turn as you get your victory points, so it's not that front-loaded obliterate on turn 1 problem that you're talking about, just by the fact that you're not getting those command points until after you have scored the victory points for the game.
Okay, fair. Yep, fair. So it isn't going to be, even if it's played into as, it's going to be more of a beta strike than an alpha strike, because you're not going to get the initial alpha strike. Your opponent's going to get a turn to cast psychic powers, to move units into better position, etc., etc., etc.
I mean, it will make certain Marine lists a bit more survivable because more transhuman obviously is always a good thing.
Well, it's just I always get when I see the increase to the command points, it concerns me because I don't want us to get into a point where there is armies that have a really strong alpha strike and can hit on turn 1 if they go first. It's still a gamble right now. But I don't want it to get to a point where that gamble offsets everything else. And we've seen players go that route when the indexes were a thing and players were trying to take the fewest units possible so they could always go first. I mean, that hurts the game.
This is all predicated on the idea that troops are actually going to be able to do the things you need them to do to get the points, and
Fact.
B, that the
Fact.
command points are significant enough to shift the balance of the game from, where it's at right now, or pre-arcs, to some kind of um, gimmicky all or nothing apocalyptic war zone that we know and love as the 41st millennium. Which
No,
is a very ineloquent way of saying it, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I
yes,
understand.
actually, that's the statement I can yield to right there, is the fact that you said, can the troops do what they're supposed to do? Because when you look at the army like Custodes, what delivery system does Custodes have for Custody Guard? They're really
don't
not
their
not
bikes
not
count
for
as
turn
it?
one.
Do their bikes count as it? I mean, behind enemy
No,
lines,
no.
bikes, their jet bikes can
Specifically
do it.
troops. Specifically troops.
Let me
So the
read.
Custodian Guard are not going to push on that for 1-2 turns to be able to assassinate, especially not behind enemy lines. I mean, you could, but
Right,
I
but
mean,
that's my point. Like, I'm not so worried about it because I'm not particularly scared of troops. Now, Harlequins have been tearing it up, and they're probably one of the exceptions.
I think knights too,
Harlequins have
right?
been tearing it up all edition, honestly.
Say again?
Harlequins have been tearing it up all edition, honestly.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so this is a case of the rich get richer, right? Where the Harlequin troops, which have always been good, will continue to be good because now you're giving them more resources to play with.
I mean,
Whereas, for example, Space Marines, they're all, Space Marine troops are nothing to write home about, nor are Eldar troops, nor are Necron troops, nor are blah, 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 blah.
what about your Crosshairs? Aren't they troops? The pilots that mortal that do crazy rend.
Yes, I have never seen a unit of Corsairs be used to great effect, which may say more about my familiarity with the game than anything else. But
Hold on. I gotta call you out on here or something, Graham, because to be fair, your your Black Templars list has quite a bit of troops in it.
Oh, for sure.
And they look like they're ready to do some heavy lifting.
Well, that's Black Templars.
And how many of those things that my troops focused heavy Black Templar list, how many secondary objectives, are they going to be capable of scoring me?
I mean, they get you
Already
behind
talked about
enemy
the secondaries that
lines.
I'm going.
Yeah.
They're not going to be behind enemy lines because they move 6 inches a turn.
I mean, I thought you were
They're
gonna
not
put.
going to be doing grind them down because it's unreliable and you're not going to be taking it.
Mhm.
They're not going to be doing assassinate because anybody can keep their characters away from 6-inch Templar squads.
True.
Maybe.
Yeah,
And you have no way of
I mean-
advancing and charging, right?
they can run advance and charge.
I mean, depends on the list. You might take you're in a position to possibly take assassinate if you're going into the list and you look across the field and go, wow, that's a lot of characters and those are all combat ready. Okay, sure, I'm going to take assassinate and score that. Yeah, they're 9 times out of 10, probably not. But I could see you at least playing assassinate, where the other ones, no way. You're not built for that.
I mean, with
But-
the elite character slot open up now, I mean, people might be tempted in the early days to do character spam. I just don't see it actually being viable because any
Yeah, so
good
it's-
character you're taking, put in front.
Yeah, I just, when I'm looking at secondaries, I know DJ disagrees with me on this. I don't want to give my opponent a chance to deny me secondaries. So I'm going to pick secondaries that I can get on my end and just kind of ignore the other player. And Assassinate is one of the critical ones where an opponent, a good opponent, can keep their characters away and deny me points while still winning the game on their terms, which to me is just nope, utter nope.
Well, it's not that I disagree. It's that you have to. A lot of armies you can look at it and look at 30 points that you can pick up. 2 15-point secondaries that you can build into that, like you said, are very, very uninteractive or minimally interactive in some cases. And you can really take the opponent's factor out of the game.
Mhm.
But with some of the armies, Necrons and Sisters were ones that were lucky to be able to just pick it all from their book. Other armies
And
usually
Eldar early in the edition.
and Eldar early in the edition. But the rest of them are looking at 2 and then trying to figure out that 1. So I just keep an open mind to the factor that there may be that time that you look across the table and go, I'm going to take Assassinate this time because all of your characters are going to be mine.
maybe, and this could be short-sightedness on my part, but the way I look at it is most of the dominant armies that I have seen throughout the edition, and this is very, mono perspective, but the armies that I have seen throughout the edition have been the ones that you mentioned, Sisters, Necrons, and Eldar, for example, ones that can play the I don't care what you do, I'm going to get 100 points game very well by playing passively in their table quarters, in their own deployment zones. And so
Yep.
for me, I am going to try to build armies as close to that as I possibly can, with the caveat that not all armies can do that to the same degree because all the secondaries are different. So, for example, Black Templars not going to be a top tier army because they can't play that game very well.
No, but it's fun to pilot that to a win. And
Oh, yeah,
that's
no,
what
exactly,
yeah, yeah.
But you see what I'm saying? Is like if I'm
Oh,
going
I
to
do.
choose to build an army, I'm going to try to do the winning formula as best I can, even if somebody else is going to do it better.
Yep. And I mean, most of the time, no. Most players are not. A lot of players are tacking into their list and not playing to assassinate. So usually that's not even an ideal secondary to ever take. But I'm saying there's a chance.
Okay, and if there's an outside chance, I will go ahead and say I don't think it's going to be a significant issue with the metagame or playability of 40k or this edition because it is such an outside chance.
No, see, so I'm gonna disagree.
All
I'm
I
gonna
was trying to say is you're running big, scary troops.
I'm gonna disagree conditionally, and I think what it's gonna be
Conditional
is
disagreement.
nice.
This is so formal.
Well, I have to put on my big brain hat to talk to you two. I think knights are gonna be perhaps run away with it. The armigers can absolutely run up and kill a character. They're not even the mainstay of their army. I've played knight lists with one giant knight and a lot of little armigers, and the armigers can kill stuff. They can get behind enemy lines. They can generate that extra CP for the knight, even though the knight's gonna get an additional one from his knight oaths. So it's gonna give knights just that little bit of reliability and gain that extra CP. And as we all know, they love that CP to help them run their
But
armies,
if they
do
don't
whatever
have
they
any
want.
nuggets to spend command points on, it doesn't matter.
I'm sure their armigers have specifics, right?
You have Imperial Knights that are walking into a meta that is vehicle heavy and Melta heavy right now. This is
Vehicle heavy, Melta heavy, shooting heavy. At
oh
least
yeah, this
initially.
is
Later on, Zach, you might be right, but I think just to start off, I'm
Imperial Knights are going to have a bad time for a little bit.
I see it.
Yeah,
I think that
you're
their
not wrong.
secondaries
That
are
looks super, super scary. If Knights can get rolling, they can put a lot of CP in the bank real fast.
and reliably. You see what I'm like? I think knights have a chance in this meta, and maybe it's because I'm a giant robot guy, but I really I think that they if they do it right, if it's gonna be a knight player that's gonna learn the tech, he's gonna figure it out, and then it's gonna landslide. And knights are something gonna be the big dog, and everyone's gonna be scrambling for a knight army.
What CP farm do knight like what do command points get knights that they're lacking right now? Because I can't.
They get ion
So
shields.
Knights.
They get ion shields, way to blow themselves up. Like they can run into you and just suicide bomb.
Ion shields. Start with ion shields.
I think it goes up to 4. Yeah, instead of 5 up. So that's big for them.
But first, hold on. There's one key point that you're dropping out, Zach. They cut you off for this.
Yeah.
The Imperial Knights have the ability to generate 2 command points at the beginning of each turn instead of 1, as long as they're and there is the way that Eric plays them. I played against him a couple times. From the beginning of the game, he's gaining 2 CP a turn. He starts with 0, but man, as long as his warlord's alive, he gets 2. Yeah, that's what it is. As long as his warlord's alive, he gets 2 CP at the beginning of each turn.
I mean, yeah, they're already getting the 2, but the secondary is giving them an insurance to get that 2. If their warlord dies, then they have the capability to still gain that CP through such things as assassinate behind enemy lines and whatnot. They can take a look at the list, and at their enemy's list, and they have options now. And that's what makes an army strong, is that they have in-game options to do what they want. Like Necrons had 3 secondaries in this last edition, and they took them, and they had options to score throughout the whole game whenever they wanted, which made them really strong. Like I didn't.
But again, they die their knights in their vehicles going into this meta that is going to be hating on units of vehicles. I just don't necessarily think they're gonna. I don't think they're. This is not a good time for them. It's nothing to do with knights or their codex, but something will need to shift in the meta, people's mindset or something, to pull people away from vehicle hate so that knights can survive again. Right now, it's just a bad time for knights.
I mean, what
I
do you
mean,
think,
look at
Graham?
your list and look how much Melta you're packing.
I mean, it's because I give something to Melta. Like, I'm not taking Melta because it's meta. I'm taking it because I'm a Salamanders player, and I can now stay in the tactical doctrine, and I get +1 to wound. I have to go against guard tanks that are toughness 8.
So that's exactly it, Zach. You look at what you're teching into. Melta is good. Even if you're giving Melta a boost, which you are, Melta is still good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's not,
Mm-hmm.
that's true for just about everybody, not just Salamanders.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I think we've thoroughly explored this this question. So my next question for you guys is what type of questions do you think a competitive player, a new one, experienced one, whatever, should ask their opponent to get a good grasp of what their opponent is playing?
Well, that with every player, there's going to be different things that your army's going to want to do. So it necessary sometimes there's a lot of things your opponent's going to explain with their roster that really are not going to matter. You don't every single warlord trade, every single relic, and all this stuff. Some of it's not really going to matter. Some of it just translates to I have spells and abilities that let my other spells and abilities go off bigger or go off further.
Mm.
So the biggest thing is where is your opponent's army going? I always want to know first, right off rip, if any of his units have forward deploy. I want to know if any of their units can get deployed outside the deployment zone or move outside the deployment zone. I think that's one of the number one things is because I need to know where my opponent's going to start their game from or could start their game from, especially with randomization of who's going first and second. I mean, I also like then just into charge effects, threat ranges,
I
basic
agree.
thing.
Threat ranges are a huge deal. That's kind of the number one thing that I think of is, when I'm talking to somebody, I say, okay, so I don't really care what the specific warlord traits are. I don't really care what the specific relics are. You say, okay, this guy is shooty, this guy is choppy,
Yep.
this guy is buffy, and how close do they have to be to do the things that they want to do? And that's kind of what I care about. Is he
Yep.
close shooty or is he far shooty? Is he out of line of sight shooty or is he in line of sight shooty? Is he choppy with a stratagem or is he just generic choppy?
And if you assume some of those units, like, oh, it's a shooting unit, okay, if it looks at me, it destroys me, and I'm just going to assume that happens every time, you kind of get in a better position, too, because you just go, okay, that thing's going to destroy me, and not, oh, that can't hurt me. I have a 2-up invul and this and that, and then turns around and a Hecaton hits you with a Magna Rail, and you go from 13 wounds to 1. And go, oh.
But I think the most important way, or the thing you can control the most as a player, is the distance, right?
Mhm.
You can't shoot me
Yeah.
if you're out of range.
Right.
And I think that's kind of one of the critical things that is important to look for is what kind of range and how can I mitigate the range question. That again, that's in your control as a player.
Right. And everything's out in front of us. All the measurements are out there. Yeah, some of it times it's fast math in a sense, and that's one of the reasons I love using the plastic templates like I do, to leave them out on the table and to finish off movements. If I want to be X amount of inches away or at a certain spot, one with the Necrons with the Tomb Blades, I'd always measure out 18 and leave the templates on the table for it in a certain way so that my opponent knew if I went first, I'm just going to put the Tomb Blades on this objective, and here's why. To help speed up my game and make sure I was putting units in a really precise place. But I like how you also said the way you can, it's measurements and ranges are something as the player you can control. And I want to kind of talk about that more is that why are players so afraid to pre-measure something and tell their opponent, okay, I'm putting this guy here. He's 16 or 25 inches away. You cannot deny the witch on him. Maybe that's a little broad for that, but why are players afraid to give their opponents information like that? I always try to tell my opponent when I deploy something and move something, so it's specifically at a certain distance so that there's no question when we start moving if suddenly it's like, oh, they're in range, they're going to shoot at you. No, they shouldn't be.
So I think part of this comes from like a lot of competitive players are very experienced Warhammer players, and there's a lot of new players. So you can certainly tell the difference between newer edition players and older edition players. Like I think Graham will remember when we were playing in sixth and seventh edition. It was a big deal when seventh edition came around, and they said pre-measuring is now allowed. Like we were like, oh my god, we don't have to guesstimate anymore. Like before you take a shot. So you always got in this mindset of always erring on the side of caution to start. So you'd be like, okay, what's your range on your weapons? And then you couldn't pre-measure, but you had to guesstimate. You knew the table size, you knew what the distance of no man's land was, and for some players, that was more than enough. For me, I always got nervous and second guessed my placement, and it would always lead to bad thing. I don't know if you remember that, Graham, or if I'm just making it up.
I remember it from Fantasy, where you'd be doing trigonometry in your head to guess the range on your cannons and so forth.
I love that cannons, like when they hit the ground, they'd roll and
They'd bounce. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the actual cannonball flying, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the bounce. The bounce is what got you.
Yeah, and then like it rolling into someone's foot. Oh my god!
You're not wrong for it being included in 40K as well. In 40K, you're talking about there was no it's third edition, no pre-measuring, and we were in the time of guess range weapons.
Oh yeah. See, I started as a kid, so a lot of my 40K knowledge is like I learned at that prime learning age, and as they've changed editions, it's I've definitely become a dinosaur in terms of adapting to it. Took me forever to like realize that I couldn't
I
just
see it in
Raven
newer. I was playing in that edition, but I see it in newer players, where newer players are still afraid to just pre-measure, measure, and play with intent. It makes the game so much easier.
Oh, for sure. Like I'll tell my opponent like how far is your max charge distance, right? And they'll be like that. I'll be like, okay, let me check. If I'm 10 inches in my deployment zone, confirm here. I'm out of charge range, correct? And they confirm it, and that's that.
I think one of the things you said right there, Zach, is they confirm it. Like you're playing with your opponent.
Right.
You're not just declaring we are now 25 inches away. I can see you. It's like no. Here's where I'm at. This is where you're at. I want to be 25 inches away. Does that look good to you? Yes or no?
Yep.
If they say no, you can get into it and talk about it. Like, okay, well, what do I have to do to change it to make it?
Yes. Yep. How do you make them? How do you make it yes? How do you make it yes? I put the unit here behind this wall. Can you see me? Yes. Move it back a little further. Can you see it now? No. Okay, cool. That's where it goes.
Yep.
So with the pre-measuring, yeah, certainly important. But what other questions do you think we should be asking our opponents?
You want to have a beer?
I mean, that's a good one at the end of this on day 2. Yeah, like if I've only ever gone 3 in a row.
And are you 21 years of age or older and legally allowed to drink this beer?
I mean, typically when it's an old man with a beard, yeah, you can tell.
You don't know. It could be like 3 young guys in a trench coat.
I saw a kid walking out of a high school the other day, and man, that kid had a beard.
Yeah, we're growing up faster every year.
I mean, you don't have to be under 18 to go to high school. I don't know why you're being so ageist, DJ.
I thought you had to be 18 to go to regular high school.
No, I'm just saying that he hasn't been growing that beard for that long, and man, that kid had a beard. Then again, it could have been a teacher. I don't know. I wasn't really staring.
Yeah, fair enough. So I actually have I have a list. So one of the local guys, right? When I got back into competitive, he was super hype, and he gave me like a little cheat sheet. So I wanted to share that with you guys and hear what you thought of these questions, right? So do you
saying is you asked us a question that you already knew the answer to?
Oh yeah, because I wanted to make fun of you. I wanted to make fun of you and just be like, look, I got the answer. All right. So the important questions I ask my opponent before the game: do you have any fight last effects? If so, how many? And it's a really good one because like, if they happen to have adjudicator, like, and you charge in, you know,
Disagree. What if I'm playing a shooting army? I don't need to ask that question.
you don't. You see, you can take them on and off. That's the best part about questions. You don't always have to ask all of them. Is there any way you can heroically intervene more than 3 inches? Yes, because you've gotten caught by my salamander 2d6 heroic intervention, right?
Probably. It's sneaky.
It is sneaky. It is sneaky. What do you think, DJ?
But I'm playing against Tau, and Tau don't have any combat prowess.
I mean, they can have the honor gauntlet on their captain that can drop bodies.
Next question.
Any way to make non-characters heroic?
Again, this is all like movement stuff. This is all movement shenanigans.
Yeah. Any advance
which isn't bad. Like it's good. Movement shenanigans are awesome.
Oh yeah.
But it's just kind of a trend.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. And then you kind of have to. And what my point I'm trying to make is once you know what you're playing against, you're going to ask the same questions that involve that same cycle of like move and move applications, and it all comes back to the core question: what is your threat range? Because at that point, when you ask what their threat range is, a lot of those other things get answered right away. Well, I can move unit A X inches. They can advance an auto 6. Then for a command point, I can charge with them after they advance. Boom. All 3 of those questions right there off the top got answered just by the question, what is your threat range?
I mean, it's not just threat range, right? Because it's also scoring. If you can have something that's, moving, like heroicing an extra 3 inches or an extra 6 inches, all of a sudden somebody can hop onto an objective that you didn't expect them to. And that can have relatively large implications if you get caught out.
For sure.
I agree. And I think that's an important piece of information to disclose from the army. But a lot of armies that have the boosted heroic, it's coming in their detachment. And when my opponent's telling me what their detachment buffs are, that's where I'm expecting to hear those heroics. Usually, I mean, there's a couple. I know there's a couple that are non-existent, just stratagems. But for the most part, non-character heroics are coming off of an army buff. Or like Space Wolves, that's part of their detachment.
Okay. What gotchas do you have? That's the next question. Yeah.
Ooh. I think Auspex scans are gotchas in every army.
The next question is Auspex scans, yeah.
I think they're gotchas in every army, but I think they're ones that are easily fixed. I just think in general rule, if my opponent puts a unit down in front of one of my units that can Auspex scan or equivalent, shooting at a unit within 12 inches that arrives during reserves, if my unit can do that, it's good.
Well, Zach, you're saying that one of your questions should be, what gotchas do you have?
Yeah, what gotchas do you have? Yeah. I also have the Auspex scan next, so do they have an Auspex scan?
I think Auspex scan is kind of a gotcha, because you can let your opponent finish resolving reinforcements, put them down, and go, okay, are you done? All right, well, since you put that unit there, I'm now going to shoot at it.
Are you talking about this from experience, DJ?
No, because we played before that game, Graham, and I already knew it was there. That was not a gotcha. That was I forgotcha.
I forgotcha. Oh, that's good.
All right.
Now, when you play against someone you practice against, they are at no liberty to tell you anything about anything at all at any point during the game, especially if it's the finals.
I don't agree with that.
Nope.
I felt so bad.
I didn't.
For the listeners, we were at a GT, a local, well, not like a GT, but a local tournament. DJ and I practiced together, and like the night before, or a couple nights before, I had done like a forewarn stratagem where I shot at, out of phase shooting with some Dark Reapers on a unit that he was deep striking. Lo and behold, last round of this event for first place, he and I are playing, and he places a unit right in a forewarn spot, and boop.
That lost me the game, because I was strong arming you with the Dragoons. I got in on your Shining Spears, up the center or something. I hit you earlier and faster on a charge with the Dragoons than you were expecting. Mm-hmm. And because I screwed that up, that gave you the foothold to push back and take it over.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah. And then I also asked, can they turn off my Overwatch? That's actually big for me as a Sounders player.
But now I'm not playing Tau.
Yeah. I mean, you obviously, like I said before, you ask these questions conditional based on the army. It's just a good sheet to have for reference.
Yep.
I obviously ask
I
if
almost think it's just best to assume that every army can shut off Overwatch, because realistically, almost all of them can in some way.
in some way, but I would like to know how they can do it so I can avoid it. You know.
And I challenge you to name me an assault-based army that doesn't have a way of heroicing a non-character unit.
Space Wolves.
Space Wolves can heroic their entire army.
Yeah, only
4 inches.
Not if
4
they're
inches.
not if they're a successor.
Space Wolves have the capability of heroicing their entire army 4 inches.
Blood Angels.
Talk with Sam. He's vicious with it.
Graham.
Hmm?
Any army you know of that can't heroically intervene that melees?
Gene Stealer Cult.
Yeah, Gene Stealer Cult. Ah, I got you there. Gene Stealer Cult.
I have no idea if that's actually true.
Yeah, I have no idea what they do.
Moving on.
I asked if they have any capabilities like double shoot or whatnot, and what unit can do it. That way I can.
Double taps key. It's not a very common ability in the game anymore. They kind of reduced that really out. It used to be like, I mean, obliterators did it, robots did it. There was a ton of
Eradicators, aggressors. I'm sorry, 40K community.
Another important one is firing into combat.
Oh, that's a good one. I add that to my list. Can you fire into combat?
I mean, right now it's basically going to be every single unit with a vehicle-based meta.
Or a pistol.
I mean, I think unless it's got like a blast weapon, right?
It's pistol.
Unless still can't fire into combat.
Correct, unless it's blast.
And then the next questions are, how do you affect the psychic phase? So, like, do they get any pluses, minuses? Can they stop me from doing anything?
Oh man, Graham's doing all his work in the psychic phase.
Yeah, I just kind of let him do
it. How does it feel to look at an army without psychers, Graham?
You know what? I'm not gonna lie. When I don't have my space magic phase, I get tingles in the force. I feel tingles in the force.
You don't even like Star Wars. How do you have connection with the force?
I mean, maybe I don't like it because I have such a strong connection with the force.
Yeah, he thinks it's a poor mistelling of his family history.
Exactly. They whitewashed everything.
Okay. I ask about any turn 1 deep strikes or the ability to deep strike close to 9 inches away.
I think that's a more important question now than it was. I think that prior we weren't really looking at a lot of things being put in reserve. Everybody was playing on table for the most part, except for a unit that you might have paid the points for specifically. It's deep strike or later arrival abilities. But now I feel like with strategic being free, we're going to see a lot more units being put in reserve. A lot more people are going to sidebar some of their army to not lose it in the first round against some of the higher powered shooting armies. So I think that the off table is going to be a very interesting part of the game now. And yes, knowing who comes in on turn 1 is going to be huge.
You could probably make it more general by saying something to the effect of, any redeploys or abilities to enter or exit the table. So I'm thinking like, swooping hawks. They can jump, pick up, and put down again. You've got warp spiders, pick up, put down again. You've got terminators who can pick up, put down again. And so it's not just deep strike, it's deep strike in addition to a bunch of other stuff. Or like movement stuff in addition to just being put down on the table. That's after the fact.
That's definitely way better than the current question for sure. And then I always ask about pregame moves, always, because Necrons, like you have pregame move. Because I actually did play one Necron player at a tournament who didn't use the pregame move, so I was like, yes, it was worth asking.
Was it the mission where you're not allowed to move out of your deployment zone?
No, it was the guy with 2 Catans. He had a dynasty.
Oh.
He kicked my
now
butt.
You can see more of those dynasties.
Yeah. Any way to manipulate charge distance, and what that means is like, how Tau can take away from your charge distance, or you can add to your own charge distance, like that. Like, is there any sort of ability like that? So I can, when I'm playing,
threat range.
Yeah, essentially threat range. I guess that would be threat range, but more specifically to charges in general. Because like turn 1 threat range is like,
I think a lot of the stuff though you're covering does kind of fall into the sense of what your opponent should be telling when they just go over the base level of their roster with you. And when they go through that stuff and you hear the basics of who can leave the table and can't, what it comes down to it is you need to know what does that translate to. And I think it goes back to threat range. Really, everything bases down to what is the threat range. How close do you have to be to do this? All of this.
Okay.
I mean,
And
threat
figuring that.
range, and I'm going to say it again, threat range and scoring. If you can pick up a Terminator block and put it on my backfield and then, contest a point, I want to know that before I start making decisions about who gets deployed where.
And I think that comes into listening really well to when your opponent tells you their secondaries. And that's when you look across and look and go, and who do
Wait,
you
what?
do it?
Secondaries?
Yes.
Okay, you got to walk me through that because that makes no sense to me.
So when your opponent tells you the secondaries, okay, so they tell you your army, you look at it, you go, okay, what units can pick up and redeploy and stuff like that. You know it. And then they go and tell your secondaries and they don't have engage and they're not doing behind enemy lines. Okay, so now they're playing more defensively, more cagey, more into their home. Why? What does that mean? Versus an army that, like, you look at, I saw Wes with his Carcharodons. He's got a psychic power out of that Raven Guard, that Shadow Step.
You can teleport a character,
That basically like Gate of Infinity.
but for a character.
Right. So when they tell you about that, and you look at that and you go, oh, okay, you just teleport a character. You may not think as much of it until you hear, I'm doing behind enemy lines, and then you stop and go, and how exactly are you doing this? Where are these guys at? And look across there and see who's deep striking, who's got the teleport. And that's when that you really dial that one in. But at the same time, too, I mean, there's other secondaries that involve movement around the table as well. Behind enemy lines is just one of them. And
I was
engage.
thinking more like primary points. But it would also, I guess you're right that it would also come up with secondaries too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and because secondaries, I feel, is where people are building their game off of more. And that's where you can kind of look and figure out what your opponent's battle plan is going to be based on that. And that's where you can pick up that third secondary that maybe they're not so sure of. One you can really look at and go, okay, how do I stop you from doing that? That's the tough one. That's the one you can only score 3 points on each turn. How do I stop you one turn and drop that down?
All right. So if it sounds like if I had to summarize the best questions to ask your opponent at the pregame is, what is your threat range? Do you have a way to redeploy or pick up off the table and teleport back in? And that's pretty much and any. What is your gotchas? That sounds like the good 3 questions to ask, right?
I mean, maybe not necessarily. I don't know. I mean, some people gotcha is kind of ambiguous, but I think that is kind of more of a respect issue. You and your opponent are reaching a non-verbal contract when you walk to that table that you both are trying to give each other the most honest and best game possible. And if your opponent does not wish to do that, you don't have to yell, you don't have to scream. Just look at the dude and say, "No, come on. If I knew that, that's not what I would do. That was not my intent. Play by intent. Always play by intent. And if not, call a judge. Call a judge, because I don't believe that, certain ways that gotcha moments do pop up and that stuff, you are obligated to tell your opponent about these abilities. Your opponent should be out.
I disagree with you there, DJ. I don't think you're obligated. I think you're obliged.
How so?
It's a joke. Obligated and obliged mean the same thing.
The synonyms.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes.
I was like, oh, here we go. I'm like,
you
here
can
we go.
tell you can tell Graham
Here
wears
we
a
go.
monocle
Now we're
and
gonna
smokes a
finish
pipe.
out the night, aren't we?
Yeah, you can you can tell Graham wears a monocle and smokes a pipe and just has a study.
Listens to smooth jazz.
Yeah, and has a book and a
that's
fireplace.
smooth jazz. I gotta say, my upstairs neighbor has been going deep, doing deep explorations.
Fair enough.
Smooth jazz.
All right. And tonight's final question. We wanted to talk I believe DJ, you said it best. So when I asked you about it,
Squig meat is the best meat.
is it?
Squig burgers for life.
No, I believe it was Eldar Burgers for Life. They're like
What's your,
vegan,
what's your
but in the
question, buddy?
40K. Um, so I might butcher this a little bit, but I wanted to ask you guys which is it better to build around, like scoring primaries and tertiaries or secondaries?
Going to have a good time. If you don't have an army ready and you're going to hang out with your friends, take what looks pretty, put it on a table, and go and still have a good time at the event, and just don't take it so seriously. GTs are a fun time and a good weekend and a good way to get away from some life stress. Don't take it so seriously all the time, and sometimes just go and play some games with your buddies. Other than that, I say secondaries.
I was very confused for a moment, and then it got to the secondaries. I was like, oh, okay. I was very confused. What about you, Graham?
I will disagree with my esteemed colleague here. I will say that the primary purpose of playing a game is to demonstrate your superiority over the peons who would dare to besmirch your regalness, and so you must crush them underneath your steel-shod boot. No pity, no remorse, no fear. I actually
This
don't
is
mean
why
that
we
at all.
can't have nice things, Graham.
This is why we can't have nice things. I don't mean that at all. DJ has it bang on, and
It is tough
stated it
though.
quite eloquently.
It is tough though. There's a lot of people that you have a bad weekend, you have a bad weekend. I had a tournament I went to recently that when I got there, I did not feel good, but I still wanted to play some games with my buddies. And when I didn't do too well, I was disappointed. But I said, you know what? I got away for the weekend and I needed a break. So I played out the rest of the weekend. Wasn't my best showing. I would have done much better if I didn't. Oh my gosh, I almost passed out on the drive there. It was bad. I just got like dehydrated or something. Just wore myself into the ground. Dumb, dumb, dumb. Don't do that. No one do that. But I wasn't at my A game, but I still went and had a good time because I was playing the army I wanted to play.
For sure, but Graham, primaries or secondaries? You never answered.
Because it's entirely mission dependent, or not mission pack dependent and army dependent. There are some armies that can play primaries wonderfully. Space Marines, Necrons, anything fairly tanky, big bug Tyranids, that kind of thing. Whereas other armies really cannot do that at all. They cannot play the take and hold game. Eldar, Dark Eldar, Harlequins. Harlequins can do everything. They're amazing. So it really depends on what you're playing and how you want to play. Not all armies are the same. Not all armies can play all things equally, and then even within an army, the sub-factions will treat things differently. So again, make a plan, and whatever plan you have, that's kind of one thing you're going to want to stick with. Either you're going to be playing for primaries and then kind of playing a take and hold game, or you're going to be playing for secondaries, in which case you're going to be playing a whatever your secondaries happen to be, and then shoot people off of the primaries.
Okay.
See, I have to disagree because of the fact that when you look at the secondaries, when you look at the main secondaries in the game, in the Codex, in the Ark of Omens pack, you look at those and they're very, very generic, and all of them go against what we had said before with being uninteractive with your opponent. But then when you look at the Codex specific secondaries, those are the ones that are most uninteractive with your opponents. Look at what just happened.
No. Behind Enemy Lines. Behind Enemy Lines is entirely uninteractive. 100%.
Your opponent can interact with that all day. Your opponent.
No, they cannot. Absolutely not.
All right.
They zone you out. They zone you out. You can't land.
All right, so it's my turn, and I want to say that I believe the best way to score points in 40K is to just table your opponent.
I mean, yes, if you're not wrong. It's like saying the best way to win at 40K is to roll more sixes.
Exactly.
You know what? Like they say in the NFL, what you got to do is you got to move the ball down the field. And the team that moves the ball down the field into the end zone, they're the ones who are going to win. And just like that in 40K, the one who scores the points, the one who moves the points knob up, they're the ones who are going to win.
Wait, I have to score points? I always thought I could just move salamanders across field and occasionally touch the little circle and then win.
Well, that would be scoring points.
and would be scoring points.
Occasionally.
But I do want to get into this with DJ and Zach. I know you're trying to get us off the call because it's running over, but
no, it's not. It's not. We're good. We have plenty of time.
Then we have plenty of time. I want to get into this with DJ.
Okay.
Let's do this.
DJ,
time to happen.
Let's dance. Let's dance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. So when you first look at your army that you're going to build.
Wait. Graham called audible.
I'm talking exclusively about interacting and secondaries. One of the non-interactive secondaries is behind enemy lines. You need to get one unit into your opponent's deployment zone, 1 unit per turn to get 15 points. That is not difficult to do, and you do not need to be doing it with deep strikers. You can do it with a regular moving unit and charges. Again, dependent on armies. Not all armies can do it, but you can't just say zoned out, not a problem, it must be interactive.
So, when looking at the orcs, when we discuss behind enemy lines as a secondary for them, even though my army didn't depend on what my opponent did per se, I still had to interact with my opponent's army by charging units and not dying in order to score behind enemy lines. And that still means that you need your opponent to either A, give you deep strike control, and I understand what you said without it needing deep strike control, but I'm just saying you need spaces to either deep strike in or ways to move through your opponent's army to score these points. So how are you getting into that against armies such as Tau, such as Votan, and these other ones? How are you going to score behind enemy lines versus those that you're going to build your list around?
Sure, and so I'm going to give you an example for Eldar. I'm going to take 3 units of 90-point secret the Ranger jet bikes that move and advance 22 inches a turn.
And
so turn 1, we are going to quicken them. Bam, 44 inches. They're going to be in the opponent's deployment zone. They fly. They can hop over everything. You can set the Psyker up to be behind or out of range of a die. Nothing can be done to stop that unit moving its distance to get into the opponent's deployment zone to score 3 points for the secondary. 1, 2, 3. Do that 3 times. Bam, 9 points. You have a Banshee unit that does a charge, or doesn't even have to do a charge. Again, move and Psyker. Boom, done. And then by the end of the game, you've got Baharoth or the Swooping Hawk unit. Boom, set up if they don't move and just get there on their own.
It's still leaving that your opponent doesn't eliminate those threats is one thing. And that's where because you're planning one unit to do each one time. And if any of those units get removed before schedule, now you've immediately lost those points. Where
you've lost those opportunities to get those points, and you build in extra redundancies to make it happen. So you have multiple ways of getting those points.
Wait. But there. You build in extra redundancies. So you now are building into your army and putting extra in there because of your secondary.
So you're building into your secondary.
I say you're building into your secondary, and then you figure out your primary after.
I mean, again, it depends. There are armies where that can work. Eldar, I agree with you. You want to build into your secondary and figure out the primary afterward. Space Marines don't play that way. Necrons don't play that way. Custodes
Necrons play that way. Necrons play that way.
You just
Treasure of
You just take the 3 out of the book and just kind of sit in the backfield and don't do anything, right? That's how Necrons play?
No. They changed that up.
Okay. That's how they used to play. That's how Sisters used to play.
Yeah. Purge the Vermin, you can't score on turn 1 anymore. So there's no I go first and score 4 points. That was a big shift there. Treasure of Aeon scores a little less, and Ancient Machine is the same. But they dropped Code of Combat. So Necrons are with their secondaries.
Point being, it depends on the army. Necrons can play primary. Necrons can play secondary. Necrons, you build into both. You don't necessarily seed primary the way you have to with Eldar.
But you said with Space Marines as well.
And Space Marines, I agree. I think Space Marines play a primary game very well. especially because they have things like Shock Assault, which reward them from jumping in and taking objectives, which is a primary game.
Oh, for
As
sure. Also, like
Right.
a lot of players, like when I bring up Shock Assault, even if the Space Marine players, like, why are you taking that secondary? And like Graham said,
Really?
it rewards you for playing the game. Like it's uninteractive in the sense that you don't have to go out of your way to do it specifically. You are going to retake that objective. Like the best way, I talked to Brad Chester at a tournament, and he's a fellow Salamander player. Although he didn't play Salamanders that tournament, so but he explained it to me in the best way that clicked with me, and it was he says the middle isn't something that we have to dominate. It's as salamanders or as Space Marine players in general. It's something we have to clear. We just have to be within 6 inches of that objective at the end of the turn, of the middle at the end of the turn, so we can lose it and retake that middle objective, and get rewarded with 4 points for that. I mean, you may not get primary, but if you're doing the tertiaries or whatnot, you're still going to rack up a lot of points for your primary, and it's going to work out.
No, there's specific armies that want to play on primary, center. I'm sorry, and then there's some other armies that do not want to. I mean, like Tyranids still play a good center game because of how strong their casters are, and they can do warp ritual like it's nothing. So there are some armies that want to play middle. Marines are not one of them.
I strongly disagree with you.
Marines want to surround the center and wait for your opponent to move into it, and then take it away from them. There may be a couple of exceptions with certain armies and certain builds. I'll yield that, but the exception does not dictate the rule, and I'd say the rule with Marines most of the time is you want to catapult onto center. Go ahead. Tell me how I'm wrong.
You said catapult onto center. What do you
Yes,
mean by that?
You let your opponent move into there, and then you shoot and charge appropriately to pull your units into the middle after your opponent's already dedicated their big beefy plays.
So that's
And take it from it.
so about turn 2, your opponent gets to the middle, and then turn 3 through 5, you score shock assault. Is what I'm hearing, because you're going to be trading that middle back and forth. Because there's no way that you completely clear them off the middle in such a way that they don't come back and take the middle. Like, would you agree, Graham?
Don't you have to clear one unit that's in the middle?
Nope. For shock
you don't
assault,
even have-
I have to just control the middle objective by the end of my
Oh,
turn.
So hang on. Shock Assault. Double check. Make sure I'm old manning this.
It's shock
Assault
tactics.
gets you Shock Tactics gives you 4 victory points for taking an objective that an opponent controlled at the start of the turn.
At the start of the turn, yep.
Flip side, Oath of Moment gives you 2
Shock
victory points for having a unit within 6 inches of the center.
Yes, at the end of the battle round, score victory points for achieving the following 3 oaths. Oath of Duty. Score 2 victory points if an Adeptus Astartes unit from your army is wholly within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield. Oath of Honor. Score 1 victory points if any of your units didn't fail morale test. And then Valor is if you killed a unit, you get 1 victory point.
So this is kind of slightly tangential to what the original question was of playing primary versus secondary.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that if you build a Space Marine army to say, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take primary points and trade on primaries every turn as often as I can. You are playing the primary points, and you can find secondaries that support that, but your primary way of going about the game is on primaries.
I almost feel like we're getting to a which came first, chicken or the egg point, because I can kind of see your point, but on the opposite end of it, I look at armies like when I was Sisters of Battle and Necrons, where you look at how they play their secondaries and how they score them, and for a while, Necron was looking at that center objective. It didn't matter if we held it. We didn't need to keep it. We just needed to control it at the end of our turn. And as long as we control it at the end of our turn, we start scoring buku points on all sorts of things. Then you go and wipe us off and kill it, and we only score 8 into our primary game. But
so
the
we're essentially agreeing in that we're saying that each army is going to have a different set of priorities as to whether they're going to play on secondaries or primaries.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Right.
Because it's just they both fall back and forth with each other in that sense.
I mean, okay, so that sounds good. So you both agree that it depends on the army, and how you're gonna build it. So I think
How do you feel
that's
about all-around sticky objectives in the primary game?
I think it doesn't do anything for me personally. I mean, like my infiltrators are still gonna send my back line and stop out demons from zoning, and my main force is gonna be the ones taking that third objective I need for primary. Um, I mean, I guess 200 points for a unit that I can pick up and walk around the battlefield again anytime I want to with my guerrilla tactics is it's not a tax. I know a lot of players are just like to buy troops, and I'm just like, well, it just brings me down to two infiltrators. Personally, that's all I care about. Like I'm stopping demons from getting my back line, which makes them play to my how do I say this? My anvil is what I call my strong center troop, and now I have a tooth. I mean a flame, I guess is what I call it. Um, because I played against Graham, and I totally got outmaneuvered by him. But he'll tell you like I kept my infiltrators in my back to stop anyone from deep striking around two my two objectives. If that makes sense. Um,
Mhm.
Um, and I play as a Salamander player. I play with an anvil, is what I call it, which is like my strong brick of whatever I'm doing. So right now it's two aggressor squads of five with a apothecary and a squad of blade guard at five, and they're gonna move up to dominate one side of the field, and maybe they touch middle, but most likely it's what ends up happening. I found is in competitive games, and this is my experiences, it becomes a ring around the rosy, and whoever can catch them, the other opponent's tail first, typically starts scoring points first. So I've now included some specialty faster units that are gonna stall my opponents on their rotation, on their flanking maneuver, to let me catch their tail. If I
No,
was
I
maybe
have to
like
rebunk. I have to rebunk though. There is definitely some Marine armies that can play off the center and actually plan to play the game at center. There's only a few armies that you'd have to think about that it's like, oh, I can play off the center 90% of my games, just not these three matchups.
So DJ, I'm going to at some point show you how good Templars are in the middle of the board, just giving everybody just a big old middle finger, say, "Come get it."
oh, and don't you worry, we'll make sure that's painted too. We'll put black paint on it, so Graham will have a painted army.
I will have the fastest Abaddon black spray painter fingers in the West.
So
Yeah, you
which
can just
army
put contrast
which
paint right in the
which
airbrush.
list do you want? Which list do you want? Who you calling out? Calling out my Grey Knights, my Necrons, or my Admiral?
Oh yeah, your Grey
All
Knights
three of
aren't
them.
even your
All
Grey
three of
Knights
them at
aren't even
once.
Marines. Like, you won't
6,000
even
points. 6,000 points. Bring it on.
6,000. What are you gonna bring
6,000.
2,000 points of Black Templar, Graham?
What's that?
You gonna bring 2,000 points of Black Templar versus 6,000
2,000
points?
points plus 4,000 points of free worker. You betcha.
You don't get that much.
Multi-meltas for everybody.
It's crazy that your supplement's the best. It's absolutely crazy.
It's not the best. Iron Hand's the best.
No, you have the best supplement. Like it gives you the most. It's the most interesting. It actually makes your army play like a different army.
I feel like Space Wolves have a lot going for them, as do Blood Angels. Blood Angels get my money for the most thorough and different supplement.
All right. Well, I think
What do
we
you
can.
mean thorough and different?
Number of units added, the most flavor, the most different, the most out there, most changing the fundamental way the army plays.
Well, I mean, by that extent, then there's only one thing that you've proven at the end of this phone call.
What's that?
If you say that Blood Angels are the most different and dynamic, then that means that if they're number one, that's because Grey Knights aren't Space Marines.
No,
Or
it's
they're just kind of.
I mean, yeah, whatever. Fine.
It's
Grey
like-
Knights are totally different. Look at all of the things they have. Who else puts their HQ in a baby carrier and runs them around the field?
I mean, Blood
Nevis
Angels.
is trained by Grandmasters.
Blood Angels do the same thing. They put their librarians in dreadnoughts.
He's not wrong.
But they're dead.
So was the guy in the baby carrier with a helmet. Just he is a sitting target. He is a sitting target. He is prepared to be shot by a sniper rifle. There is no reason to put him in there.
Do not argue semantics about baby carrier. He has force shielding and it's stronger than the rest of the knight.
No, What? This is the Lex Luthor debate all over again. Anyways.
Well played, DJ. Well played. Credit where credit is due.
All right. We'll call it here for tonight. Maybe next week we'll talk about how to build a list with these primaries that Kate's kind of touched on. But either way, thanks for tuning in. And Graham, do you want to say anything before you go?
No, I do not.
No, he's a man of few words. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. DJ, do you want to say anything before you go?
Absolutely. Please, if you like this content and like to see other content on my channel, including faction-focused videos on your favorite armies, please subscribe. Also, like, share, and leave a comment below. Your comments also help us decide what our next topics will be.
For sure. And for me, I just want to say good luck to everyone that's going to LVO this coming weekend. Good luck to the #1 Space Wolf player in the Midwest. Sam, you know who you are, bud. Besides that, everyone have a good evening, good day, good, I don't know. I tried doing the thing from the Truman Show, but I never...
Good evening, and good night.
Yeah, I never saw the Truman Show. But I tried to copy it. Anyways.